This past week in the gym, I incorporated some blood flow restriction training for my quads and my hamstrings, opting for this technique because of its time efficiency. Now, with only 1 hour to train, I was aiming to maximize results in the shortest amount of time possible. During my workout, I used 30-second rest intervals and training loads of about 60% of my usual weight for a 12 to 15 rep range. This approach allowed me to efficiently challenge my muscles while optimizing my limited training time. During my training session, several interesting observations really stood out to me. First of all, blood flow restriction significantly reduces training volume without compromising muscle growth. This means that as long as there is sufficient muscle activation and fatigue, growth can still be achieved. Even when using this advanced technique to lower the volume, it doesn't hinder muscle development, which is a powerful insight for optimizing workouts. Interestingly, low load training to failure without blood flow restriction produces muscle growth similar to that achieved with blood flow restriction. The primary difference lies in the number of repetitions performed. So why is low load training effective? It effectively recruits, activates, and fatigues the muscle fibers involved in a movement, achieving this through a higher number of repetitions with lighter weights. This approach allows for significant muscle engagement without the need for heavier loads, making it a valuable strategy for stimulating growth. This concept is nicely illustrated in a 2019 study by Morton and colleagues, which examined EMG amplitude between low load and high load training as the surrogate for muscle activation. The researchers also included a more direct measure of muscle activation, which is glycogen depletion. When muscle fibers are activated and stressed, they utilize glycogen as a fuel source. Thus, assessing glycogen depletion provides insights into whether activation levels are comparable with low loads despite differences in EMG amplitude. In this study, participants completed 4 different acute training bouts, with muscle biopsy samples taken after each session. They performed either high load training, performed at 80% of their 1 repetition maximum, or low load training, performed at 30% of their 1 rep max at either a fast or a slow tempo. The authors found that while EMG amplitude was significantly greater in the traditional high load training conditions compared to the low load, glycogen depletion in both type 1 and type 2 muscle fibers was similar across all conditions, irrespective of the load or the repetition duration. This glycogen depletion indicates that muscle fibers were activated and fatigued similarly across all training protocols, which reinforces the effectiveness of low load training for stimulating muscle growth. This example also highlights the role of repetition speed in training. The pace at which you perform repetitions can influence the total number of reps completed, but it won't likely affect muscle growth outcomes as long as you are training close to failure. In fact, when you think about it, nearly every advanced training technique modifies the mechanical or metabolic stress placed on the muscle. Some examples include drop sets, supersets, and tempo training. This means that by adjusting these variables, such as the load, repetition speed, or rest periods, we can reach fatigue, activation, and failure through various combinations of these factors. Essentially, it's all about finding the right balance to optimize training stimulus and elicit muscle growth regardless of the specific approach used. Drop sets, rest pause, and pre-exhaustion are all effective advanced training techniques designed to maximize muscle fatigue, activation, and failure. For example, drop sets involve performing a set of an exercise to muscle failure with a heavy load, then immediately reducing the weight and continuing to perform additional repetitions without resting. By alternating between this high and low load, drop sets enhance muscle fatigue and promote activation for different muscle fibers, providing a pathway for muscle growth. In rest pause training, a fixed repetition range is completed at a certain load, followed by a short or extended rest interval before attempting additional repetitions. This technique allows for extended time under tension and maximizes muscular fatigue within the same set. The goal is to push the muscle to their limits, thereby promoting greater activation and fostering muscle growth. Pre-exhaustion consists of performing 2 or more exercises back to back for the same muscle group, where the first exercise is designed to pre-fatigue the target muscle before the second exercise is executed. This method can lead to reduced volume in the second exercise, but it intensifies the muscle activation and promotes greater fatigue, another approach which effectively achieves muscle growth. Now, before I wrap up, I'd like to share another helpful example. Consider low load training paired with longer rest periods, let's say 2 minutes between sets. In this scenario, you can perform a high number of repetitions. Now, if you reduce the rest period to just 30 seconds, you notice a significant decrease in the repetitions required to reach failure. In this instance, you're effectively using rest periods similarly to blood flow restriction, leveraging the metabolic environment to accelerate fatigue across sets. However, it's important to note that shorter rest periods may not yield the same benefits when applied to high load training. The limited recovery time might push you beyond the hypertrophic rep range, which could diminish muscle growth outcomes. Therefore, if you decide to incorporate shorter rest intervals with high load training, techniques like drop sets might be more effective. By combining high and low loads in this way, you can achieve the desired muscle activation and fatigue, ultimately enhancing your training efficiency and result. So what are my key takeaways? There are countless methods to approach resistance training. When the primary goal is to maximize muscle growth, it's essential to prioritize fatigue, activation, and working close to failure while ensuring adequate volume. The various factors such as training loads, repetition speeds, rest periods, and more can all be adjusted based on individual preferences and goals. Embrace the flexibility within your training regimen to find what works best for you. And remember that the journey to muscle growth can be both effective and enjoyable. So there you have it, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. And if you have any questions or thoughts about today's topic, please feel free to drop me a comment below. And if you're interested in personalized coaching, then check out the details on my website linked in the description below. I'll see you next time.